Hello everyone, welcome along to the first episode of the Double Top Podcast, your brand new show on the Sports Corner channel for all of the latest in the world of darts. It's going to be fantastic over the next couple of weeks and months, hopefully, if this podcast is popular. For you guys to join us and talk about the wonderful world, as I said, that is darts. It's a fantastic place to be, it's fantastic to watch, and it is the best sport in the world. Originally we wasn't going to do this podcast live, but joining me every week, you can see him to the right of my screen, it is one of our regular, one of the legends of this channel, I think the OG, that is Chris. How are you doing, buddy?
Through these circumstances, how about yourself?
Not doing too bad. It's I think we're quite lucky, aren't we, in the world of darts, that we've had a lot of darts going on in comparison to other sports.
Yeah, darts, football. Without them, we'd be bored as fuck, won't we?
Oh, absolutely. So this is the Double Top Podcast. As I said, this is episode number 1. Originally, we were going to actually record this, but I know a lot of you on this channel do like your darts, and why not bring it live? Throughout the show, you can send in your thoughts and opinions. We'll be talking all things darts, so if you want us to talk about a specific player at the World Championship, then put it in the chat. If you've got any questions that you want answered, then I would highly recommend putting them in the chat. And I am looking as well to put this on audio platforms, so for those of you listening audio-wise, if this does make it onto the likes of a Spotify or an Audible or something, God knows where it'll be, welcome along. You can join us on youtube.com/thesportscorneryt, not just for this podcast, we've got a whole host of other podcasts that we do as well on this. I was going to say website, but it is a YouTube channel, isn't it? I mean, YouTube is the website, the Sports Corner is the channel. That makes much sense. But hopefully, for those of you that are watching, do tell us in the chat whether the cameras are looking all right, because I've been able to adjust Chris's camera, but I can't actually see whether it fills up the box on the right-hand side, so do give me a heads up for that. But Original Gunners in the stream, how are you doing, buddy? Good to see you, as always. And as I said before, do put your thoughts and opinions in the chat. Let's start off. I think it's been quite a scary year, 2020. You know, it's not one that we really want to look back at in terms of life in general, but in the sporting world of darts, it has been an absolutely incredible year, full of fantastic moments, different experiences, and most of all, just a lot of good darts at the end of the day. You know, we had the World Championship at the end of this year, which brought us some unbelievable matches. We had the World Match Play, of course, Josie de Souza, we've had Van den Berg win some big trophies. And I think the best kind of place to start is by talking about the World Championship. You know, we started off day number 1 of this competition in fantastic style. We had fans back in the stadium for the first time at the Ali Pali, which kind of feels like a long, long time ago when we had these fans in the stadium. But they were able to see Peter Wright in that Grinch costume, of course, come out, play his game. And it was a fantastic night overall, but then after that, of course, because of the awful thing that is COVID, it meant that we weren't able to see fans once again. But from an overall point, Chris, the World Championship, you know, we didn't have fans, we didn't have that same enigmatic experience, but it still was a bloody good tournament.
Yeah, it was still a good tournament. Yeah, it never disappoints. Never disappoints through shots in and there. A new winner as well, someone who hasn't won the world title before, but at the same time was probably expected. And it was shots all over. Yeah, unexpected players reached the stages as well.
I mean, it was a crazy competition. You know, even without fans, we got some really, really good games, which we are going to talk about because we've got a whole host of things to talk about in this episode. I think we're quite lucky at this stage of the year that we haven't really necessarily got a great deal of darts going on, but we've started this podcast kind of slap bang in the middle where we've got a fairly decent tournament coming up. Alongside, we're coming off the back of the World Darts Championship. Original Gunner's put that the camera is fine. Thank you very much, Original Gunner. You absolute legend. We had nightmares trying to sort this out at the beginning of the show, but at least every time we do this podcast now, we know how to run it. But let's go on to that first main point. As I said, we're doing a championship review here, but I think it has been a little bit of a while ago since the tournament was on. You know, it's mad to say it was only realistically 2 weeks ago that we were sat kind of here. And, you know, I was getting pretty shit-faced on stream watching Gerwyn Price batter Gary Anderson in that incredible final where it felt like, you know, Gerwyn Price was going to go on and win this tournament, specifically in the final, very, very convincingly against Gary Anderson. But in the end, Gary Anderson just didn't seem to really be going away for a great deal of that final. But in the end, Gerwyn Price now, the brand new world number one, for the first time in his career. What an experience for such a young man as well. He's only been in the PDC now for, 4 or 5 years, if that. Just how incredible is it for Gerwyn Price to be the world number one, Chris?
Yeah, I think it's changed his life, hasn't it? Yeah, he was not on the door back in 2013-14. He was a bloody rugby player.
Yeah, which is mad when you think about it.
And he only got his tour card in 2015 as well. And yeah, it just shows how he's got better and better every year. I know he's not some people's biggest fan of him, but because of his antics, but deserves the credit, deserves to be world number one. He was the most consistent player throughout the year, and deserved to win the world championship. Because even though he's straight through most of his matches, but that's what champions do.
I mean, exactly. We talked about it a lot when we were doing the watch-alongs on the channel, which, as I said, if you're listening on audio, we do a lot of darts watch-alongs on this channel as well, so it's highly recommended coming over to the channel and experiencing these watch-alongs, because we've got a fantastic community of people on this channel that are really into darts. But we said before how when Peter Wright won his world championship 2 years ago, that he went down a very similar route. He had a lot of really tough games that he came through. I remember it was the likes of Malik Dem and Jeffrey Dizwan that he beat only kind of in the final set or leg. And of course, he went on to win that final. And I think you have to say, Gerwyn Price did go down a very similar route. He had a couple of last set deciders. He had a last leg decider against Daryl Gurney, which I thought maybe Gurney was going to go on and win that game. But ultimately, he just seemed to be able to keep his cool throughout the majority of the tournament. And in the end, he left his best performance till last against Gary Anderson. And I think, would you agree that maybe a lot of people kind of expected Gerwyn Price to win? Because I am a big Gary Anderson fan. I'll put my hands up. Even I thought, Gerwyn Price was going to go on and win this competition in terms of how the final was being panned out. But do you think maybe people gave a little bit too much respect to Gerwyn Price and maybe not enough to the experience of Gary Anderson?
You could say so, but I think Gerwyn Price was the favourite as well. Yeah, he got into that final with the bookmakers because he was in better form. Well, he's been in a better form throughout the year. Obviously, Gary Anderson in the yacht stages of the World Championship, he'd improved, beaten Der Vandenberg. That was his best performance of the tournament, and I think, I did have my, I had a feeling about Gary Anderson could win it.
Yeah.
Because of that experience. I think that was the only doubt in Gerwyn Price, because he's not been in the world final before. But obviously that final proved different, and Gerwyn Price showed why he was the most consistent player throughout the year, and why he's world number one, and why he's the world champion.
Well, this was the thing, because when we were watching that game back, it was only, as I said, 2 weeks ago, which is mad when you think about it, in a world where every day feels like 5 years. But it was at the point where Gerwyn Price had taken, I think it was about 4 or 5 legs up on Gary Anderson. You were thinking that this was probably going to be the quickest final that we've had in quite some time. I think we were talking about it and saying the only quicker final was Eric Bristow a long, long time ago, where he whitewashed in the final. But I think the worries looked like they started creeping in. Gary Anderson, got a setback on the board, and there was, I think, some nerves building in Gerwyn. He got a couple of match shots that he missed. I think he missed quite a few at double 16 at one point. And it was one of those where, as you said, what would have the experience of Gary Anderson had it been, maybe 2 or 3 years ago coming to play, and he won his 3rd world championship, maybe. But I mean, Going Price right now is absolutely a different animal. And Original Good has put in the chat, I don't like Price, but he deserved the championship and has had a very quick rise. Very impressive, to be honest. And I think this was the thing with Going, as I said, because he had quite a tough run. I think you've got to look back at one of his first games against Jamie Lewis, who has been out of the PDC top 32 for quite some time, and very nearly knocked Going Price out in that early stage of the competition, and it could have changed everything. But overall, a well-deserved winner, and it will be something we'll talk about a little bit later on again, of course, with the Ladbrokes Masters coming up in about 11 days' time from the point that this has been recorded. He's going to be certainly up there to maybe go on and win that competition as well, depending on what he does. But let's talk once again about the World Darts Championship, because it was only 2 weeks ago that we had it. And I think it's time to maybe give out a few awards for those games in our little kind of awards ceremony. I'm going to go through a few different kind of topics and awards that could be given out. We saw a brilliant competition. So many games went to last leg deciders. We had some surprise whitewashers. We had some incredible checkouts to win matches. But the first kind of award I would give out is for the best World Darts Championship match. What do you think, Chris, was the best match of the 2021 World Darts Championship, if you could pick one?
Anderson versus Hurfit? Nah, I'm joking. I'm
in terms of drama levels, maybe that one's at the pinnacle of the World Darts Championship.
Nah, I think it has to be Michael van Doren against Stuart Horan. Stuart Horan, I think it was 3-0 up or 3-1 up, from what I remember. And yeah, I think it was 3-1 up. And Van Doren to come back in that game. We're all getting excited saying, "Oh, Van Doren's going out. He's going out." But then Van Doren shows why he was a former world number one. Needs to get that white now. A former world number one, and shows why he came back.
I mean, it was a brilliant, brilliant game, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I felt sorry for Stuart Horan though. He didn't play that bad. I think it was till the final decider. I think it was. That's when when you know it got away from him.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the stats down because I kind of picked out 3 games that I would have said could easily be contenders for the championship match. And I think there's multiple of the games that I've missed out on this. But with the Van Gogh and Joe Cullen game, he was 3-1 down, Michael Van Gogh. And I think there was a lot of people out there who were thinking Joe Cullen was about to produce one of the very best World Darts Championship performances we'd seen against Michael Van Gogh. In terms of the average, Van Gogh averaged 100.01, which is crazy when you think about it. That's a Van Gogh standard performance. He was 51.43% on checkouts. That's 18 out of 35 on doubles. And you could tell as the game was going on, Cullen was slipping away. I think the motivation and the aspiration to win as Van Gogh started clawing back legs started to kind of dwindle a little bit. But it is certainly one of the very best games we've had at the Ali Pali, and it was one of those games where I was genuinely shaking at the end because it was just unbelievable. The fact, he's a mentality monster at times, Van Gogh, but to go from 3-1 down to come back is absolutely unbelievable. But the 2 other games I've put down, which I have missed one off, the one that I missed off was Dave Chisnell, Dimitri Van den Berg, which I thought was another incredible game. Chizzy just kept rolling on, and we thought maybe that Dimitri was going to come back in that match and have an incredible comeback of his own, but Chizzy played well. But the other 2 games I've put down, Van Gogh and Dave Chisnell, which for me is one of the best performances we've seen against Van Gogh for a long, long time. Dave Chisnell averaged 107.34. He was 48.39% on his doubles, which is 15 out of 31. He hit a 1-4-1 checkout as well, which was the 9 darter chance that Chizzy had. He missed the 1-4-1. And then straight afterwards, Van Gogh, of course, got the 1-4-1, which I thought was incredible dart shithousery. And as I said, we had that 9 dart chance from Chizzy, but that performance from Dave Chisnell, is it one of the best performances we've ever seen against MVG, do you think?
Yeah, I would say most definitely. Yeah, it has to be. he won the bets. I'm trying to remember, the best performance against Van Duren, because I'm sure other players would have had the best performance against him, like Adrian Lewis when he was done in his days, Phil Taylor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Dave Chisnell is definitely up there with one of the best performances against Van Duren. I couldn't believe the storyline, to be honest.
Well, this was the thing, wasn't it? It was the game had just progressively gone on. I think, when he went 1 or 2 sets up, you thought maybe Van Gerwen was going to do another. Joe Cullen had come back in the game, but I think by the time we got to Chizzy being 3-4 sets up, I think you could actually start to believe Chizzy was going to whitewash him.
Yeah, it was funny because before that game, people would have said, "Oh, Chizzy would bottle it against Van Duren as always," and he soon shut them off, didn't he, with that performance?
Oh, absolutely. And I think what the real shame was is that he goes into this next game against Gary Anderson. Now, you're coming off the back of a 23-game loss streak against Van Gerwen. He comes into this game against Gary Anderson. You're thinking he's probably the favourite to go on and win it. And then he just doesn't put in a performance like he did in the last 2 games. And I guess you could say maybe that it's not a case of momentum, but maybe just the electric pace of those last 2 games really took it out of Chizzy, especially when the games come so thick and fast at the very end of the tournament.
It just shows then that Michael Van Duren curse, isn't it? Yeah. You don't want to beat Van Duren, then the next round you get knocked out. It happened to Simon Whitlock when he beat him in the World Mass Play, and now it's happened to Chizzy. It's happened to all the players. They beat Van Duren, and then they're a bit too overconfident, and then it's like, off you go, you're out.
Yeah, exactly. He's a mental curse, isn't it, with Van Gerwen? It seems to just linger on forever and ever, and eventually someone will break the duct. But Chizzy, once again, another one of those unfortunate players to be cursed by MVG. The last game I did put down, Scott Waits in his 3-2 win against Matt Campbell. Now, I think a lot of people would have thought I'd have picked out the Nathan Aspinall game because he played out of his skin in that match. But this game against Matt Campbell was absolutely unbelievable. It went down to a last set decider. Both players were averaging incredibly high in terms of their doubles. It was 52% for Scott Waits and 46.15% on doubles for Campbell. And then there was the brilliant 160 checkout from Campbell, which consisted of the 2 bulls and the treble 20, which was just an absolutely outrageous finish. And I'm surprised, I think a lot of people weren't talking about that finish a little bit more, but Scott Waits, a player who's probably gone under the radar a little bit, hasn't really been in the PDC for long, been in the BDO over the last couple of years. He came out of this World Championship, and I think he could have, had his head held high. Brilliant performances from him, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, of course he might have been a bit disappointed that knocked out by Nathan Aspinall, but Nathan Aspinall was just a quality player on his day, and I think people expected Aspinall to beat him anyways, but I didn't think Aspinall would beat him comfortably. I thought final set decider. Same with the Stock Waste Matt Campbell. Then I said final set decider in that one.
Yeah.
Both quality players. So he had a tough draw, Stock Waste, let's be honest. And if Stock Waste would have got through, he would have faced Vincent van der Vaart, tough player then. And Stock Waste, he'll do well in the PDC in my opinion. Do well in the PDC. He should have moved to the PDC years ago. I felt he was too good for the BDO. And obviously with what's happened with the BDO now, he started his move to the PDC. And I think he might have a similar impact to Ken Durant. I think he could then in the top 32.
Potentially. As you said, I think he's one of those players that should have moved a long time ago. Never really did, and now he has got a chance to come into the PDC. He's doing fantastically well. And a very good player, which I will actually be coming back a little bit later on to. But let's move on to our next kind of award. I think for that best World Championship match, we're going to give that to Van Gerwen Cullen, I think, for just an incredible nail-biting, dramatic match. So if they ever do watch this podcast, congratulations to Van Gogh. And I think, of course, Cullen would be a little bit disappointed, especially with that he lost that game. But a really, really enjoyable match overall. And I think for the neutral as well, if you never watched darts before, it's probably the perfect way to start to see just how good darts is. But for every good match, there's also a bad match. Let's move on to the worst 2021 World Darts Championship match. I think you're going to be thinking what I'm thinking. I've got two candidates here for the worst match of the tournament. I'm going to start with the one that you're probably not thinking of, and that's John Henderson against Marco Cantelli. Henderson won this game 3-2 against the Finnish player. Cantelli only averaged 79.69 in this match. Nearly beat Henderson, who only hit 32.5% on his doubles, which was 13 out of 40 attempts. The highest checkout of that match was only 76, and it was just an awful, awful game to watch. I think Henderson came out in his interview afterwards, and he said he played awfully bad. Cantelli would have just been frustrated with how he played. But that is one of the contenders for this award. Chris, I've got a feeling you're thinking of the same game as what I am. What's your worst match of the World Championship?
Well, I do. That's the thing. But yeah, I mentioned it earlier for the best match when I was talking, and that is Dions and then Samantha Sorofit.
Yep.
Like, both players, you expect much better from them. Both quality on the day. Funny enough, I got the star white final set decider, but I didn't expect both of them to not turn up with the best performances, best average, poor, just poor them. And I don't blame Gary Anderson with his want after the match either.
Well, the funny thing is, it's exactly the game I put down. Gary Anderson, Mensur Suljovic. Gary Anderson winning this game 4-3. Of course, we got the incredible table gate situation, which took place before the match had even started, where, of course, Suljovic went to the wrong table. Gary Anderson complained about it, but didn't say anything to the referee, which I thought was a bit suspect. Suljovic was playing probably the slowest darts I've seen since Justin Pipe. And it's understandable to play like Justin Pipe because that's the way he plays, that's his style. And other players appreciate and accept it. They don't complain about it. But the way that Suljovic was playing, I think at one point it was around about 18 seconds it was taking per dart, which is just an absolutely ludicrous amount of time to take in between. And then, as you said before, Gary Anderson in that match interview afterwards, absolutely seething at the way that Suljovic had played. He was seething at the comments Wayne Mardle had made, the whole situation of trying to frustrate Gary Anderson. And when you look back at that match overall, it was an awful experience to watch. It was an awful game to watch of just two players looking incredibly frustrated and wanting to get off the stage. But it gave us a little bit of drama at the end, Paddy, which is what you want realistically at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's what we want, shenanigans. Well, not exactly shenanigans, but it was shenanigans with Gary Anderson after the match.
Well, this is the thing. It took them a long time to actually get to him as well, because he didn't do the interview beforehand. And I think it took about an hour and a half or 2 hours for them to actually catch up with him, to get a few minutes interview after his win, which I think is one of the first times in quite a while where there hadn't been an interview fairly quickly after a game. But I think we can both be in agreement here, Chris, that the worst 2021 World Championship match of the tournament, and I think even Gary Anderson himself would agree if he was here, is Gary Anderson, Mensur Suljovic, for that shocking display from both players, and just some really, really slow darts. So congratulations there. Good award there for Gary Anderson and Mensur Suljovic. But let's move on now to a different award, and I think this one's going to be a really fun one to talk about. The World Darts Championship, yes, it's had its good games and it's had its bad games, but it's had some surprising moments as well with players. A lot of players coming into this competition, maybe expecting to get to the third round or into the last 32, and exceeding expectations. So my next award for the World Championship is your surprise player of the World Championship. Somebody who's doing incredible, somebody who was unexpected to go far. I'm going to put one player down on the table, And for me, Daryl Gurney is one of the players I've put down. Now, yes, he is ranked high in the rankings, and you're probably thinking, well, he can't really be a surprise player if he's in the top 24. But when you look back at Gurney's year, he'd been pretty poor. Was struggling in the Premier League of darts, which is kind of where the season continued on after COVID. But the way he kind of composed himself throughout this tournament was absolutely incredible. Beat William O'Connor, which I think was a very tough game to come into. Beat Chris Dobey, who himself hadn't been in good form at all. And then beat a very tough Vincent van der Voort before, of course, losing out in a last set decider against Gerwyn Price. There was one other name that I was going to put on the table, but I'm thinking, if our minds think alike, that you thought of this player as well. Who's your surprise player, Chris?
Yeah, for me, Dal Gurney's a good shout, but for me, it was Stephen Bunting, who I predicted to get knocked out by Andy Bolton, and he just goes on a remarkable one to the semi-finals at the World Darts Championship, and it was unexpected. I thought it was unexpected, anyways. But if you were a betting man and you betted on Bunting to his semi-finals, good on you.
I'm going to say the amount of cash you've just made, especially if you did it at the start of the competition. But as you said, Stephen Bunting for me, I think it was the first name that I put down. Of course, reaching the semi-finals of the World Darts Championship, and once again putting a very good performance against Gerwyn Price. But along the way, he beat Andy Bolton in his first match, beat James Wade after probably the most miserable 9-darter we've seen, which is understandable with how James Wade was playing in that game. But he came through in that match, which I think is fairly impressive. And he also beat my outsider for the competition, Ryan Searle, which went to a last set decider as well. But Stephen Bunting, do you think that now gives him the confidence that he lost a couple of years ago? Or do you think there'll be still a few little nerves and doubts that he has to kind of keep and maintain this consistency to stay in that kind of top 10, top 20 section of the Order of Merit?
I just got this feeling now Stephen Bunting's made that one to the World Darts Championship. I just feel he's on a fall off then. He's not going to keep it going. Because we've seen it in previous years, in previous tournaments as well. Someone unexpected reaches a semi-final, and everyone's saying this is the time now for him to kick on. I just don't see him kicking on, and I just think it's just going to be the usual curse then. Having a good one at the World Championship and then Tom Pearson and then sitting back then and back to square one, back to number 25 in the world, wherever he was at the start. Then. I mean that's something to World Darts Championship of where you someone unexpected, someone Stephen Bunting who was out of form. People wrote him off, saying he's not been in good form for years now, and then he just somehow missed a one to the semi-finals. But I do hope he does kick on, because on his day, he was showing his top form then at the World Championship and the United States as well. So I do hope he kicks on now.
I mean, he's an incredible player. We saw the very best of him out of this competition. The game against Ryan Searle was a game where even when Searle was coming back, he just did not back down and kept hitting 140s. Very good on his checkouts throughout the entirety of the tournament. And for him as well, as you alluded to earlier, it was so crucial this run into improving his world ranking that I'm hoping it does give him that boost of confidence, because he's a great player on his day. We saw the very best of him a couple of years ago when he made the semi-finals beforehand. Made it once again here. And I think it was, I'm not going to say it was a very Rob Cross-esque World Championship for him, but the games that he had to play, Andy Bolton could have easily beaten him in that first match, and we wouldn't have been sat here talking about him, but he had such a tough run throughout the tournament that, the credit has to go to him. And if I'm being honest, I would like to see him, I think, as one of the players in the Premier League. Of course, we've still got that one-man position left in the Premier League, which could go to him. But I do hope that he kicks on. And, of course, we will see him again at the Ladbrokes Masters, which we will talk about in a little moment's time. Reader's put in the chat, is that a wild Chris Welch? It is indeed. It's Chris on the right joining us on the podcast today. But I did put down a couple of other players as well. Adam Hunt, he did very well in this tournament, I think. Gary Anderson, don't think anybody expected him to make the final. I think early on in the competition, I think it was about 40-1 to win it. Yeah. So even if you punted some money on Gary Anderson at the start, you've made quite a bit of cash. Diogo Portela, I think, not necessarily the most impressive run in the world, but he beat Steve Beaton 3-0, which was an incredible result for him. And then, of course, Jason Lowe, the man who qualified for Q-School, in fact, applied for Q-School with about 90 minutes left of being able to apply for it, came into the World Darts Championship and improved very, very well indeed. And, of course, boosted himself up the rankings, which now means we go from the surprise player of the tournament, just like last time. Chris, we've now got to talk about the most disappointing player of the World Championship. You know, there was many players throughout this tournament knocked out early on, chucked the toys out of the pram, and really disappointed. Who, for you, was the most disappointing player of the World Championship this year?
It's quite a tough one, I'd say, but
I love it. Putting you on the spot makes it even better.
Yeah, but just because of where he was in the PC or the merit, I think I have to go for Michael Smith. Just because, if I didn't put down price to win the World Championship at the start, I was tempted to put Michael Smith because he is true to make that one, true to win the major because he's too good on his day. But obviously, I don't know what happened to him. Jason Lowe, he was we all know he was a solid player, but I did expect Michael Smith to make a good one in this tournament. But I think that's the reason why Michael Smith, he went from number 4 in the world to now number 9. An awful one at the World Championship, and I expected better from him.
It was disappointing. I think it wasn't even just the way he played the game, it was the way he was reacting throughout the majority of the match. In terms of the stats, he lost to Jason Lowe, of course, in the round of 32. It was the last game before the Christmas break, which, what a way to end kind of that first section of the World Championship. He only hit 21.43% of his doubles, which was 3 out of 14. But for me, it was the reactions. You know, as the game progressively got towards that fourth set, where Jason Lowe went on to win the match. He looked like at one point he was going to punch the board. At the end of the game, he threw his darts on the ground. He was walking all the way up the podium that was set up. His body language and his demeanour was not convincing at all. And I think most people did expect Jason Lowe to, as the game continued on, go on and win the match. But as you said, a player like Michael Smith, you know, we've seen him before. We've seen what he can do on the in the matches on the floor. We don't tend to see enough of those performances on the television stage. I think the Masters might be a very good chance for him to rectify that, which, you know, we saw him last year in the Masters coming up against Adrian Lewis, doing very well. I think he made it all the way to the final, didn't he? I'm pretty sure last year. So he's one of those players that can turn it up on his day, but just a really, really shocking performance from him. But the other candidates I picked out for this as well, Steve Beaton, really early on. In fact, first night, this was losing 3-0 to Diogo Portela. He only hit 25% of doubles in his match, which was 3 out of 12 on doubles. His highest checkout was 38. So not the best checkout in the world there for Steve Beaton. And he just looked incredibly emotional on stage, looked a little bit shaky, nervous, which is not the usual Steve Beaton that you would expect. No. But, of course, I think it was his 25th World Championship appearance, around about that mark. And not his best one. I think that'll be one he want to sweep under the rug. Van Gerwen, you could say to a certain extent, the 5-0 defeat to Chisnell will have been something that he will not want to look back in his career. And then my other candidates, Demon Heta, of course, losing to Danny Baggish was a real shock for him early on in the competition. Adrian Lewis, he was pretty poor well. I think he was shockingly bad. Never really turned up in his game. Rob Cross, I think you could say as well, for how high he is in the rankings. You'd expect him to do better, but coming up against a player like Dirk van Dijvenbode is always going to be tricky. And then my final choice was Jose de Souza, who never really turned up in the competition either. But I am going to agree with you, Chris. I think we've got to give the award for the most disappointing player of the World Darts Championship to Michael Smith, because he really did just not put in a convincing performance at all throughout the tournament, and I think it kind of summed it up in great detail with how he performed against Jason Lowe. So Michael Smith has got an award that he probably won't want, but he probably never listened to this podcast, so it doesn't matter. But that is kind of it in terms of the World Championship awards. My second to last award to give out, the best player of 2020. Now, I think for me, there's two players on the table that could get this award. But I'm going to let you start first. Who do you think's been the best player this year overall?
Oh, tough one then. That's it.
That's what I like to bring tough questions to the table.
I wasn't say it's easy, but then all of a sudden there's another player who's in there running for it. Yeah, I still have to differ to Durham Price, because I just think it's been, as I said before, I thought he was the most consistent player throughout the year. He won the World Grand Prix, which is a hard tournament, starting on the double. Yeah, that is very underrated tournament. Yeah, it's very hard to win that tournament. I don't really want to put the World Cup of Darts in there. Yeah, that's just a doubles tournament. Doesn't really count as a single and PTO of merit.
Yeah.
I just think his performances overall. Yeah, he's been the most consistent player, and winning the World Championship just topped it off, and got what he deserved, that world title and the number one spot.
Absolutely. He's one of the players that did put down for it. As you said before, Gerwyn Price, it breaks that 7-year spell of Van Gerwen being the world number one, which is quite impressive, of course. I think a lot of people did expect, specifically the bookies, of course, for Van Gerwen to keep his status there. As you said before, got the World Darts Championship to his name, got the World Grand Prix, which I do think is an absolutely fantastic tournament. One of the better ones I think we've got in the darting world. And then, of course, he got a World Series final as well in terms of the smaller tournaments. Yeah. So a really, really good year for him overall. And he's got a shit ton of money in his back pocket as well, which I think is another very important thing for a player of Gerwyn Price's quality. Just an outstanding player.
Yeah, he'll probably spend that on kebabs now. Like he said on Soccer AM at the weekend. I had donuts and kebab when I was there.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he'll be able to get plenty of kebabs with the million plus pounds that he's got over the last couple of years, of course, in the PDC.
Especially with the muscles on him as well. Bloody hell.
That's the thing. He's still got the rugby physique after all these years. But the one other player that I've put down, and it's also another thing as well, for those of you that are watching live, or listening along on the replay of this, do put your kind of plays and the awards in the comments below, because it'd be nice to talk about what you guys think in the next episode that we'll do, which will probably be after the Masters, or we might do some in between when the Masters is on. But I think the other player that you would have probably said is Mr. Dirk van Dijvenbode. One of the most incredible players in terms of his rise over the last kind of year in the PDC. He's now in the world 32, in the top 32, which is absolutely fantastic for him. He only gained his tour card back 2 years ago. Technically 3 years now, which, when you think about it, is absolutely incredible. But he got into the quarterfinals of the World Darts Championship. He got into that final of the World Grand Prix. And when you actually look at all of the competitions that he's played in terms of the big ones, a very consistent player overall. Tended to make the quarters at the very minimum. some other competitions he was making the semi-finals, or as we said before with the Grand Prix, made the final. But ultimately, a player of Dirk van Diver's quality, we do have the aubergine joke that runs about with him, but I just love kind of his aura and his attitude. He comes out on stage with the rave music, he's pumping his fist. He is one of those players that is built, he's not built on stamina, but he's built on the pace of a game. If it's a high electric game, it brings out the very best in him. Do you think that Dirk van Dijvenbode can continue this on this year? Or is there maybe a worry that this kind of incredible run of form will eventually just start slipping and slowly he'll backtrack again?
Then I've got that feeling that it might fall off, right, in this upcoming year. But he's no mud. Averaging 105, over 100 in most of his matches at the World Championship. I think I can only see him continuing his form into 2021 and moving even more up the PDC order of merit. And who knows? I think he is capable. He's got the potential now to even win a major as well.
I think he's a mentality monster. That's the thing, because if you were watching the World Darts Championship, Sky did an interview with him, I think, after the game against Adam Hunt, I think it was, and he was talking about how, a couple of years ago he was well remembered for the 180 checkout where he hit the three treble 20s, and that was his most kind of important moment as a player, which is a very embarrassing one at least. But he was able to pick himself up after that, and he said, he changed his darts, he changed his training techniques, and he feels like a different person. And I think that's quite scary, because I still don't think we've seen the best of Dirk van Dijvenbode. I think we've seen good spells of him, and I think we have seen the best at points. But as you said before, he's averaging 100 plus in the majority of games he plays, and I still think there's more inside that man in terms of future competitions. And I really am looking forward to seeing him at the Ladbrokes Masters. In fact, no, we're not going to see him at the Ladbrokes Masters, unfortunately, because it's the top 24. But whenever we have the next big competition, I'm really excited to see what Dirk kind of brings to the table, because I think he will look at this year and think, I could go out there and win a major. I don't know whether you agree with me on that or not.
Yeah. I think I mentioned that before. I think he's got the potential from what he's shown to win a major. It's all what's important for him. He just doesn't want to be like Michael Smith, for example.
Yeah.
Being in plenty of finals, just not then all that line. But I think Dirk is a different person to Michael Smith. Like the way we saw Michael Smith at the Worlds, Dirk is completely different. He's got great mentality. I think he wins a major. Maybe not this year, but who knows? Might be this year, but I think in the future, I think he wins a major for me. If he just continues that mentality and continuing that averaging over 100 as well, without a doubt.
Hopefully, because I think there's a lot of people out there, darts fans that kind of, he's kind of like a Leicester City of the darts world. People just really like him because of what he brings to the table. He's got very different walk-on music, a very different personality to other darts players. As I said, he's, really fixated on the momentum of a match, and that kind of brings out the best of him. And I think one of the best examples we had was the Rob Cross one, where he must have been celebrating for a good 5 minutes after the match had done, and he just had to kind of take a moment to compose himself because the momentum was flowing through his veins. But a really, really brilliant player to watch. But I do think, as much as Dijvenbode has had a fantastic year, and as much as I would love to give him Best Player of 2020, I think you have to give it to Gerwyn Price, because he's brought that duct of the Van Gerwen #1 spell. He won the World Grand Prix. He won the biggest competition of them all. And I think we've got a lot more of Gerwyn Price to come over the next few years in terms of big majors and big titles.
Yeah.
So Gerwyn Price wins Best Player of 2020, which means we can move on now from that previous calendar year of darts to move on to our last kind of, not necessarily award, but thing to talk about, the one to watch for this year. We've got a lot of really good players that we saw at the World Darts Championship. Some good youngsters onto the scene. Some new players, of course, coming into the PDC. Who, for you, Chris, could be a one to watch this year?
Ooh, now that is a tough question.
It's a tricky one. I've got 3 on the table if you want me to run through mine first and give you a bit of an idea.
Yeah, I think that would be better.
So I could say 4, but I was going to put RVB down. And the reason why I was going to put Raymond van Barneveld down is not necessarily because of his good performances, but a one to watch on whether he makes it out of Q School or not. Because he has the experience as a World Championship winner, but is he going to have the darting skills to be able to get out of what is such a tricky competition? But putting RVB aside, because he's not got a tour card yet, the 3 players I picked out, first player was Adam Hunt. I think he played fantastically well at the World Darts Championship. A very young player, really, really calm on stage. And I think he's one of those players that, if he can use the momentum of that World Championship run, I think we might see him a little bit more in the big future competitions. Maybe not necessarily making quarters or semis, but making the last 16 or the last 32. Because a lot of the games he played very well. That Dirk van Duijvenbode match where he played against the Dutchman, he was doing really, really well in that match. But it was just one of those performances where you had to put your hands up and say, Dirk van Duijvenbode is playing a much better game than me. So I put Adam Hunt down there. I did put Scott Waits down there, as we said before. Haven't seen much of him in the PDC yet, because he's only just recently joined because of the BDO. But once again, very similar to Adam Hunt. I think after seeing his performances at the World Championship, he is a World Championship winner, remember, in the BDO. He has experience of winning these big competitions, and he's had experience of winning some big games at the biggest stage. And if he can use that momentum, I do think we'll see a lot of Scott Waits in the future, which really excites me because, as you said before, I do think we will see him moving down the rankings this year and potentially maybe making his way towards the top 32. And then my last one to watch, Michael van Gerwen. And the reason why I picked MVG out is, how does MVG perform this year?
Yeah.
Now he's not ranked as the world number 1. He's going to have a lot more momentum to get that back. We saw a little slip-off period at the end of the year, and I think you could maybe say even at the World Championship we still didn't see the very best of MVG. How does he react? How has he taken this last couple of weeks of practice and time to reinvigorate himself and get ready for the new calendar season? Is he going to be world number 1 by the end of the year? And that's why, for me, I'm looking forward to seeing what hopefully could be a revitalised MVG. But I've given you some time to think there, Chris. Have you got an idea in mind?
I've got 3 players. You've mentioned 2 of them. The other one I mentioned, people don't say, you say that every year, but I have to be like Darry Neville with Paul Pogba. I'm gonna stick with Jeffrey Deswan.
Yeah. It's fair though, isn't it? It's an understandable pick.
I was tempted to say Scott Waits, he was close. And Van Duren wasn't far behind either.
Yeah.
Because of how using his number 1 spot. But Jeffrey Deswan, please just show your potential. Like, a bit like Dirk, like, he can average over 100 easy every match. But Jeffrey Deswan, he's just been inconsistent. And I think some darts fans have obviously done, some Dutch fans as well, have said Jeffrey Deswan, he can be the next Mike van Duren. He needs to do a lot more better.
Yeah.
Perform a lot better to be like Mike van Duren. I'm not saying he's gonna overtake him in the future, but he should be a top 16 player. He's too good. He's got huge potential. The good thing for him, he's still young, Jeffrey Deswan, and you saw his potential in the World Mass Play, I think, where he reached the semi-finals. I think he knocked out. I'm sure he knocked out Van Durven on the way, or Adrian Lewis. I know he knocked out Adrian Lewis on the way, and I think it's just not his potential. Like if he doesn't show it, I'm sorry. Yeah, wasted talent. That's what I would say.
Well, this is the thing, though. He's one of those players where I think, as you said, he's got so much potential, but he never really has shown it. I think there was one player a couple of years ago. I can't remember his name. We don't tend to see him much anymore, but he was a young German player who burst onto the scene a few years ago.
Max Hoff, was it?
I don't think it was Max Hopp. I think it was another one. And if somebody knows the name of the player, then definitely put it in the chat. But there was a German player who came onto the scene not long ago. It was only a few years ago. Played really well. I think he was moving up the rankings and then just disappeared pretty much off the face of the earth. Not necessarily off the face of the earth, but I think he just dropped down heavily in the rankings. So if anybody knows who I'm thinking about, then do put it in the chat.
It's not... is it in? I think... He's quite small, isn't he?
I think he's fairly small. Maybe somebody like Danny, who's in the chat, are we all good, Danny, might know what player I'm thinking about. But
Matt, is it? I think it's Martin Schieber or someone like that.
Schindler. Was his name Schindler? I think
Schindler.
Schindler. Something.
Yeah, Schindler.
I think that was the name of him. As I said, he burst onto the scene, was an incredible player, and then just dropped. And his standards just dropped and dropped and dropped, and now he's nowhere near the top. I don't think he's anywhere near the top 64, which we'll talk about the order of merit in a second. But, I kind of worry for Deswan that if he doesn't pick up his form soon, yes, he's still a young player and he's got a lot of time to develop. But the longer that this kind of form goes on, where he's not progressing in the rankings, you think as a sports player, mentally, how much of a toll is that going to take on him over time? Because he's a great player on his day, but we just don't see it enough.
He's basically, he's basically like a darts version of Crystal Pirates. Against the big teams, he's a danger.
Yeah.
He's a danger to the big players. Walt Ross said it a couple of years ago when he faced him in the first round of the World Darts Championship. He went, "This is the worst draw I could had." But Walt Ross went on to beat him. But this one has that potential. He's a danger to these big players. That's only if he shows his potential. If he doesn't show his top form, then obviously he does that big comfort you.
He's a great player on his day. It'll be interesting to see how Deswan does this year. But Ben Peterson is in the chat. How are you doing, buddy? Hope you're all good. Welcome along to the Double Top podcast. Do send in your questions and comments for those of you just joining. We will read out your questions at the end of the show a little bit later on. But that is our rewards for the World Darts Championship. If you are watching this back on the replay, then do put in who you think should have won the awards that we've talked about today. And then in the next episode, we will have a look at some of your comments. We'll read them out, and we'll have a look at who you guys thought should have won some of the awards for the World Darts Championship. But let's move on, because we are kicking on for time. We took quite a bit of time on that section, which I did expect, because there's so many players you could talk about for each category that we could sit here for endless amounts of days talking about some of the greats and the terrible players of that World Darts Championship this year. But let's move on to the PDC Order of Merit, because that's the next kind of position to talk about. We are now moving into a new darts calendar year. The World Darts Championship is done. Gerwyn Price has won it. And we're moving on to the first big competition of the year, which is the Ladbrokes Masters, which will be starting in 11 days' time from today. But as we can see on the screen in a moment, we'll talk very quickly about the PDC Order of Merit. I've got the top 60, which we'll talk about here. Of course, realistically, I should have had the top 64 up. But it was just more of a case of time. I was rushing about a little bit. But as you can see on your screen right now, we've got the top 20 players in terms of the PDC Order of Merit as of today. So Gerwyn Price, of course, currently sat in first place. £1.3 million he made this year, which is absolutely crazy considering that Michael van Gerwen in second just made above £1 million. But looking at some of the big names on there, as we said before, the incredible run this year for Stephen Bunting puts him into 17th place. We've got the likes of Joe Cullen in 16th. Michael Smith dropping down the rankings. He goes into 9th. Gary Anderson, he drops into 8th. And Rob Cross still stays in 4th place, which means he's got a opportunity, of course, to be playing in the Premier League of darts in a few weeks' time. Well, I've said a few weeks, it's probably in a few months, depending on the situation at hand. Moving on from 21 to 40, you can see Mensa Suljovic just out of the top 20. Dirk van Dijvenbode in 32nd place, which is fantastic for him. What a season he's had. But a couple of other noticeable names on there. Adrian Lewis has dropped down the rankings. He's in real danger of dropping out of the top 32. And of course, he's very lucky that he's only just made the Ladbrokes Masters. Gabriel Clemens, he's in 29th. Ricky Evans, he finishes in 30th in terms of the rankings of this year. John Henderson as well, he's dropped down the rankings to 40th. And Ryan Searle, as we said, one of our surprise players in terms of how far we thought he'd go in the competition, currently ranked 37th. Ryan Searle, brilliant player to watch this year. Really, really enjoyable. Just how far do you think he can go in the world of darts?
I think he's definitely. I think he can definitely get in the top, be a consistent top 32 player. Yeah, top 32 player in PGA Order Merit. Because you saw many players went to number 30 in the world, for example. Brendan Doran, a notable one. Yeah, he used to be a top 32 player consistently. Now he's dropped out. But then, he's done on his day. But Ryan Searle, I want to say he's got potential to be top 15 player, but there's so many quality players in that top 16. It'd be hard for him to break into that.
Yeah, we're quite lucky, aren't we, with the amount of incredible players we've got, that there's so many good players around about the top 32. If I get it quickly back up on the screen again, we've got the likes of William O'Connor in 36th place, Kim Hybrex, who is another one of those players. He can be incredible on his day and really poor on another. He's ranked 38th. Max Hopp, he has absolutely bolstered up the rankings recently. He's 39th. Keegan Brown as well. He's another great player on his day. There are so many players around about that 30th mark, just a little bit above the 32nd place, that it could be anyone's to get by the end of the year in terms of the rankings for the World Championship next year.
Yeah, this is why there's so many quality players, man. Like in darts, and so many quality young players as well, and potential players. Yeah, you got Adam Hunt, for example, who's nowhere near the top 32. He can, I think we were talking about him before, in terms of one to watch. He's another one who I do expect to, if he keeps his form up, to be a top 32 player. But there's so many players. One player out of form, Stephen Bunting, who was obviously on the print. Number 25, start the World Championship. Now he's near enough the top 16, just outside top 16. He plays like Vincent van der Voort as well. He can easily get back in the top 16. And it's just so many players.
We're blessed. That's the thing we've done. We're blessed with so many incredible players that burst onto the scene. I think it'll be interesting to see what the Q School brings up as well in a few weeks' time. I think they just announced today, actually, that today was the last day to apply for it. So depending on what happens, we might have a few incredible players back with tour cards again, which will be interesting to look forward to. But just having a quick look as well, some of the players outside the kind of the top 40. This is 41 to 60. There's still some very, very good players in there. The likes of Darius Labanauskas, the Lithuanian, who tends to do quite well in competitions. We've got Luke Humphreys and Luke Woodhouse, two players that tend to pop up fairly often in competitions. We've got Demon Hayter, who, as I said, I think he's another one to watch out for this year, depending on how he plays. And then towards the back end of the pile, we've got the likes of Jelle Klassen, Mickey Mansell. We've got Edgar TV, of course, the absolute legend that he is. Adam Hunt as well. And in 60th, we've got Kyle Anderson, who has just dropped off the scene a little bit over the last couple of years. But in terms of 41 to 60, the likes of Demon Heta, Matthew Edgar, do you think maybe there's a chance for them to maybe go under the radar a little bit, sneak up the rankings over time, and maybe in a few months' time we're sat here talking about some of them pushing towards the top kind of 32?
Most definitely. Demon Heta, he's definitely one I expect to get out of the top 60, out of the top 41. Another player, in future years, I expect to be in the top 32, to have the same impact as Simon Whitlock when he first came to PDC. He came from the BDR and he reached the final straight away. In his PC debut. I'm not saying David Hector's going to do that, but I do expect David Hector to have a good year. And if Dirk Vandenborg can do it, then David Hector can certainly do it.
I mean, he's a brilliant player, and I think this year has proved that those types of players who maybe are a little bit further down the rankings can go on and push up and maybe get into the top 32. And of course, we've got to rep our boy, the legend that is Edgar TV, of course. A little bit up further up in the rankings. I think he's a fantastic YouTuber. And I think, once again, very similar to Dirk van Dijvenbode, if you watch a lot of YouTube, he's kind of like a Leicester City of the darts community. Everybody loves him. And come on, Edgar. We love to see you in those competitions as well. So that is our talk about the PDC Order of Merit. I think the one question we've got to ask is, with the world number one, do you think Going Price is going to be able to hold it, or do you think Van Gerwen is going to produce a comeback this year and claim back that world number one title that I think he, in his head, will be thinking he deserves still?
I mean, don't rule out Peter White either. Peter White's
of course.
Peter White would just enjoy being the underdog, in my opinion, behind Price and Van Gerwen. Well, I still expect Price and Van Gerwen to fight it out, but Peter White, I think he has that underdog mentality. Even though Peter White said in his interviews that he's the best and all that. All three of them are at it. And I got this feeling Van Gerwen's just going to win it back.
I mean, it could be a very, very quick year in terms of Going Price having this world number one status, and then, of course, Van Gerwen winning it back. But as you said before, I think Peter Wright, with the comments that he comes out with, I think you have to have that mentality, or else, specifically for those three, because they're so far up in the rankings. I mean, looking at it right now, fourth place Rob Cross made £505,000 less than Peter Wright. So there's nobody after third place that is anywhere near the likes of Peter Wright, Van Gerwen and Going Price. I just think that all three of them have got to have good mentalities if they want to become the world number one. And it's going to be an interesting year to see how all three of these do.
I think the most questions, the most pressure is on Price and Van Gerwen for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that race for number one. Gerwen Price, first time being world number one. How will he cope with it? Mike Van Gerwen, he's had them many years of being number one. He's never been in this position before with his number one spot taken off him. And Peter Wright is sitting back, chilling, don't mind me. You two fight it out and skip up in tournaments. And Peter Wright could pounce on that.
Who knows? I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens this year with the PDC. We've got 3 world-class players, the very best in the business, who are all going to be fighting out for that world #1 spot. But before we go on to our last section, I think it's actually worth talking about some of the comments now. Our last piece we are going to talk about, of course, is the upcoming Ladbrokes Masters, which is in about 11 days' time, which, of course, we're very looking forward to because it's the first chance to see some darts this year, if you don't include the World Darts Championship. But let's read out some of your questions and comments. As I've said before, for those of you that are watching live or on the replay, you can send in your questions and your comments throughout the show. Leave them in the comments section, and I will highlight some of them next week to talk about in the first opening bits of the podcast. Whenever we do the next one, of course, I think it will be around about the point of when the Ladbrokes Masters is on. But I'm going to start with the first question. Rowan has asked, who's your favourite player in darts and why?
Oh, of course it was Peter Mannier, but as he's local, so many.
It's hard to break it down, isn't it? I think we've all got 5 or 6 different players we kind of like to watch and appreciate for the skills.
Nathan Aspinall.
Fair shout.
Yeah, I love his mentality. It's unfortunate he supports Manchester United, but
I didn't know that. That should put him down a little bit in my calibre of favourite players.
He's just one of them players. I want to do well. I want him to do well. I want him to win these big tournaments. He's just a quality player. Other standout. Nathan Aspinall's my main one. Other standouts, of course, Dirk. The way he ties himself on.
Yeah.
Devin Peterson. And then more stage presence. Peter White, yeah, you can't doubt him either. But Nathan Aspinall's my main one, personally.
Yeah, I mean, he's such an enjoyable player to watch, and I think for me, I really like him a lot. I think he's one of the players that I kind of like to watch in the background. Is every time he comes up against someone like Gary Price, it just brings out the very best in both players, and I think I'd be very interested to watch Aspinall against Dirk van Dijvenbode because I think very similar. Both of them rely on a heavy-paced, intense match to bring out the very best in them, and I think putting those two together in a game would be fantastic to watch. And we saw it with the Scott Waits game. I think Scott Waits really gave it to Aspinall, and it brought out the very best of him. In a game where, he even said himself, when he was 2 sets down, he was like, I'm out of this competition. I might as well start packing my bags and get ready to go home for Christmas. But he came back, did incredibly well, and he's such a good player to watch and a really, really enjoyable figure in the PDC. And then the other question that we've had in the chat, Daz, hope you're good, buddy. Good to see you as always. He's put, guys, a question for you. I think a question we talked about a little bit a moment ago. How do you think Peter Wright will do this year?
I think they previous years. I still think he'll win majors. I think it'd be C if he. I think I'll be shocked if he doesn't win at least one major. It depends on the mentality on these players, like Price, Van Der, and all 3 of them. Peter White as well. They want to win everything. But all of a sudden, Price, Van Der, that's knocked out in one time, and I expect Peter White to win it. It's just all if buts and maybes. But I think Peter White, he'll be all right. I know that's a whine, but
well, Sky like to do that fairly often, don't they, with Peter Wright?
That's one for Peter Raymond.
If you the chat.
I think Peter White, he'll still be a top 3 player. Whether he gets number 1 or not is another thing. But yeah, I think he'd be Peter White. Then I expect him to be consistent throughout this year.
Yeah, as you said before, I think he will win. He has to win one of the big majors this year. As you said before, I think the way you should play it is, let go in. Going Price and Van Gogh and kind of bicker with each other over the year. Just sit back and relax. Just let them kind of go at each other because every competition this year will be if one of those two gets knocked out, or if they both get knocked out. Peter Wright will always be up there as the favourite to go on and win. You know, no matter what competition comes their way over the next few months, unless somebody goes on an unbelievable run where they win, the first 2 majors of the year in a row, they're always going to be the first 3 names at the very top of the rankings for the bookies and just bets in general to win competitions. And I do think he'll win one. I don't know what the competition will be that he wins, but I think he has to go in there, as you said, keep calm, keep relaxed. Maybe, he can make the odd kind of statement here and there, I am the best player in the world, because he's got to have that mentality if he wants to win. But I think all 3 of them will win a major this year.
Yeah.
I'd be very surprised if one of them didn't. But Peter Wright, he's a brilliant, brilliant player on his day. And I just think he has to just keep slowly going under the radar, because for him, it's working right now to a certain extent. If you can let go in Price of Van Gogh and bicker with each other, we could be sat here at the end of the year saying he's maybe won more than 1, maybe even 2 majors. You just never know.
I expect fireworks between Price and Van Derwen over number 1. Van Derwen, he doesn't really get too carried away. No. I think Price will. Price will get too carried away. Right, you saw Van Derwen was arrogant when he was number 1 for a few years. But it was right to be arrogant. But I do see Price, Van Derwen just having a few bickering words to each other.
Yeah, I would expect it. As you said, he's world number 1. He's got to make the most of it. He might only have a year of being the world number 1, so you've got to enjoy it while it's there. But thank you all for your questions in the chat. As I said before, if anybody wants to put any last-minute questions, then you've got a little bit of time before we finish the show off. For those of you that are watching, then do put your questions in the chat or the comment section for those that are watching on the replay. But let's talk about the last piece of news to talk about tonight, and that is, of course, the Ladbrokes Masters 2021. It's our first big competition of the year, if you don't include the final of the World Championship. And this is going to be a big opportunity to see all of the top 24 ranked players. It's the first time that we've had 24 in this competition. We usually used to having it in a 16-player format. And if it's a 14, it wouldn't work if you had 14 players. A 16-player format. Do you think having the 8 extra players in there is going to make it a little bit more enjoyable?
Yeah, most definitely. It gives them players outside the top 16 a chance to have a good one in this tournament as well. I'm sure, Jeffrey just, my one to watch is in there. Jeffrey Deswan is in there as well. But this is a tournament now. I go to these tournaments, and I think the 3 players who should have a good one in this tournament, and to end their trophy who do, I think 2 of them, Chisnell and Smith.
Yeah.
Another one who just purely, he only turns up on the floor, doesn't turn up on TV stage, which is Ian White.
Which I think is a very good shout.
I think them 3... But I know I'm not be proved right. Then, them 3, they'll go through the past first round. I'll get a bit carried away saying, this could be the tournament. But then they get knocked out. Then it's back to square one. I just want them 3 to do well.
It's a tough competition. It's one of the only competitions where it is just ranked players left in it. And as you can see on your screen right now, this is how the Ladbrokes Masters is looking. Of course, it is 1 weekend of action, so we're not going to have 3 weeks of darting entertainment, which is a real shame. But 3 days of action will do. As you can see, the first round, plenty of really, really good games in there. Joe Cullen going to be taking on Stephen Bunting, 2 players that did impressively well at the World Darts Championship. Going to be interested to see how they do. Followed by 2 players that didn't do well at the World Darts Championship. Michael Smith taking on Adrian Lewis, which is actually, again, we saw last year in the quarters, or the semis, I think. Michael Smith, of course, going on to win that, getting himself into the final against Peter Wright. That's going to be an interesting game to see who wins that, especially with both players looking to bounce back from such a awful World Darts Championship. Glenn Durrant taking on Mervyn King. I think that is a brilliant, brilliant game to watch. Glenn Durrant did pretty decent at the World Championship. Mervyn King looking one of the more consistent players of the year without fans being there. Your kind of outside punt, Chris, Ian White taking on Mensur Suljovic, which is the first game of the night, actually. And I'm kind of not looking forward to that if Mensur Suljovic plays extremely slow darts, which he probably would. Jose de Souza, he takes on Johnny Clayton, two players who I think will be a little bit disappointed with their runs at the World Championship, but a fairly even game on paper. Dimitri van den Berg, a player which we didn't talk about, one of the best players of the year. He takes on a very out-of-form Chris Dobie, so maybe this is a good opportunity for him to, of course, kind of build on what has been a really poor year and improve and become a better player. Krzysztof Ratajski takes on Simon Whitlock. That's a repeat of the game we saw at the World Championship, so a good chance to watch those two face off against each other again. I think Whitlock will be hoping it's not a 4-0 defeat again, although it's only on legs this time. And then Daryl Gurney takes on Jeffrey Deswan in the first round. So I tell you what, Chris, looking at the first round, quite a lot of really, really good games to start off this competition.
I think the Oldham can potentially go to finally a decider.
Yeah, oh, easy.
Especially in White versus Surfit.
If you mean a last leg decider, will it be about 9 o'clock at night? The first game won't have even finished.
This is the way Surfit plays. Durrant versus Mervyn King probably just stand out in that lineup, but it's hard to say which matches to stand out towards the wall quality matches.
There's some brilliant, brilliant games in there. And then, of course, we've got the very highest ranked players in the world that are already through to the second round. So the winner of Joe Cullen versus Stephen Bunting takes on Gerwyn Price. So we could potentially see a repeat even of the World Championship semi-final if Bunting goes through. Gary Anderson could face Michael Smith or Adrian Lewis. I'm kind of hoping Adrian Lewis goes through. Of course, Gary Anderson and Adrian Lewis have had some incredible games against each other in the past, including, I think it was the 2015 final of the World Championship. 15 or 16, one of the two. Durrant and King, if they go through, they will face Rob Cross, which I think both of those players will be fairly happy with that side of the draw. White or Suljovic could face Nathan Aspinall, which is going to be a very tough game, considering Aspinall will be looking to bounce back after what he will probably think is a disappointing run at the World Championship. How about this one? Jose de Souza or Johnny Clayton. If they go through, they've got to face the world number 2, Michael van Gerwen. What a game that would be for either of those two players. Dimitri van den Berg or Chris Dobie, they'll face off against James Wade, ranked 7th in the world. Of course, Wade, very disappointing run for him at the World Championship. Of course, made the final earlier on in the BoyleSports World Grand Prix. Was it the Grand Prix? It was, wasn't it?
No, Twansiam darts.
That's the one. I couldn't remember which one it was for a second there, but James Wade, he'll be looking to bounce back. And what about this is for a tie as well? The winner of Ratajski Whitlock will face the world number 3, Peter Wright. So that is going to be an absolute belter of a game who goes through. And then finally, of course, Daryl Gurney or Jeffrey Deswan will face off against the world number 6, that is Dave Chisnell. So there's some really, really good games in there. As you can see on the screen, it's from January the 29th to January the 31st, so it's only one weekend of action, which is a real shame. No fans in there as well, but hopefully, fingers crossed with how things are looking in the world right now with vaccines and stuff, that maybe in a few months' time with the Premier League of Darts, we might have fans back in the stadium. But as for now, Chris, Ladbrokes Masters, who do you think is going to go on and win it?
It has to be one of the big 3. The world, I don't know, man. The world champion normally wins the first time of the year.
Yeah.
So Peter Wright done it last year after he won the world championship. I have to go for Gerwyn Price.
Gerwyn Price. I'm going to say I think Peter Wright's going to defend his Masters. I'm going to go Peter Wright. I think, when you look at his run, it's a very tough run. When you get into the latter stage of the competition, I think he could potentially, let me just have a look on the screen, he could potentially come up against MVG in the semi-finals. So, he's going to be tricky in that respect, but I'm going to back him. I'm going to back him. I think he's going to defend it.
That's where the battle for number 1 starts.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's the perfect place for it to start as well. You know, it's, as I said, it's the very best of the very best left in this competition. And what a way to start. Pretty much every game is going to be absolutely fantastic to watch. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. So we will probably do another podcast for this. Maybe in between the Ladbrokes Masters when it started. We might talk about some of the games that have gone on. But one question very quickly. Daz has asked in the chat, thank you very much for the questions, by the way. Who do you think is going to be the 10th player in the Premier League, Chris?
Not waiting from Barnfield, please.
Hey, who knows? In a few weeks' time, RVB might be back in it.
It's tough. It's tough, way, because I don't think you can give it to Bunting because he only had one dud one in the tournament, which was a dud one.
I'm going to put my hands up and say I think it's Chizzy.
I think it's between Chizzy and Wade. James Wade has made his point here, though, saying he doesn't really want to be in the Premier League, which is fair enough to him. But I think that was years ago. I think Chizzy will do it.
Yeah, I think Chizzy. I mean, maybe Wade's kind of outlook on the Premier League might have changed a little bit, you know, especially now they've got rid of the contenders format, which I think is a fantastic thing to get rid of. You know, it worked in some ways, but it didn't in others. But I do think Chizzy will be up there. I think there's a few people shouting for, Dave van Dijvenbode, maybe to be the man to get in there. You know, he's been good this year, but been ranked 32nd in the world.
Won't be Bob Pierre.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
If he did anyone a damn.
I'd like to see him in there, but who knows, Chris? Maybe RVB in a few weeks' time is the player we're talking about.
No, please don't.
I think we might have a rant podcast if he gets through to the Premier League.
If that's the case, then you may as well put Phil Taylor back in.
Well, let's hope that in a few weeks' time we're not sat here saying RVB's in, or else it is going to be, I think, a pretty long podcast where Chris rants and raves about RVB getting in there. But it'll be interesting to see who gets announced as the Premier League player. That, of course, is not taking place on the usual date. That's taking place a little bit later in the year with the hopes of fans coming back. But it has been a fantastic first episode of the Double Top podcast. Really, really appreciated. And there's lots more content still to come on the channel for those of you that are watching live. As you can see, tomorrow you can join Matchday 17 Goals Show with Rowan, Kieran D and Kieran L. That's on the 19th of January from 7:20. Then on Wednesday, the Super Cup watch-along, I'm going to be with KL. We're covering Juventus versus Napoli live. That's going to be a brilliant, brilliant game to cover. Then, Bundesliga with live watch-along, Gladbach taking on Dortmund. Roman is going to be covering that game in a few days' time. An absolute mouth-watering clash in the Bundesliga. We've got AC Milan as Atalanta for the first time. Saturday Night Social takes place. I'm going to be live from 10 to 5 for that. You can bring in your footballing questions or sporting questions before Manchester United Liverpool. That is Sunday. Have you got nerves for that one, Chris? Kissing his badge, you'll love to see it. That's on Sunday. And then, of course, if you are a darts fan, well, just you wait. 29th of January, 7:10, we'll be live with the Ladbrokes Masters. First round of action. Going to be brilliant, of course, to see some fantastic games, including the likes of Glenn Durrant taking on Mervyn King in that first round. Looking forward to that in 11 days' time.
Any bets on 0-0 in the FA Cup? Man United and Liverpool?
Who knows? Who knows? Hopefully it's not a 0-0 again, because it wasn't the most enjoyable game in the world yesterday. But who knows what the FA Cup is going to bring. But I just want to say a very big thank you for all of you that have joined for the episode today. As I said, this is episode 1, the first time that we've done this. It's not going to take place every week, but our next episode will probably be around just under 2 weeks away, with the Ladbrokes Masters taking place. So keep an eye out at the _ top corners, where you can follow me on Twitch. Sorry, not on Twitch, on Twitter, and you can keep up to date with when I am live with videos and when the other guys are live too. But before we finish, big thank you to Chris as well. Greatly appreciated for joining me as always, our regular guest on the podcast. Don't forget to leave a like and subscription if you have enjoyed the podcast, and leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below, and we'll look at those in next time's episode. But as for now, have a fantastic morning, evening, or afternoon wherever you are, I hope you enjoyed the Double Top podcast. See you again soon. Good night.
Take care.